Hello, and this is King here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today I'm going to try out this old team again. So it's a 2-to-1 unkillable team, block damage more specifically, with Helicath and Warcaster. Doom Priest is going to make it affinity friendly against all affinities. Deacon will give it a 2-to-1 ratio. He has to be in the lead. Of course, you can always sub in a different DPS champion like a Calvalax who has the same aura. And then with Doom Priest you can replace with block debuffs and whatnot. But we'll focus on this team here. So we got Ronda, the new champion. She's going to come in with a damage. So she's got 4.3k attack, 252 speed, 100% critical rate, and 221 critical damage. So I try to keep her stats relatively reasonable, and she's not in Relentless gear. I've turned off her AoE A3, and she's just going to use her A2 and her A1. You've got no books into her, just to try and make the damage more reasonable for everybody else. If I put books into her, her damage might exceed and it might be crazy. I understand my gear is really good, not everyone has my gear, so I thought this would be a good balance. So Deacon Armstrong, prioritizing his A3 then his A2, but he will do that automatically, so it doesn't really matter. He's got 100% critical rate, 179 critical damage, 233 speed. He can go slower and he can go faster. I think his speed range is about higher 220s to higher 230s. Ronda, she cannot be any slower than 250. If you have speed and life and those sort of sets on her, you got to be real careful with 250. If you go 251, you'll pretty well be safe. As for if you want her to run in Relentless gear, she needs to be faster than Helicath. Doom Priest, I got him at 205. He can go anywhere down to I think 200, and he can gain quite a lot of speed if you really want. He's prioritizing his increased attack because I don't really need to. The AI should do that fine. Then we get Helicath, so he's opening with his A1. This is the only real important thing. Turning off his A2 because the A1 will get more damage and more weakened chances, and of course his A3 prioritized. He's at 256 speed. He can come down to about 252. He can go up a little bit more, but then it becomes too much of a distance between he and Ronda. Then we got Warcaster. He's at 275 speed. He can come down to about 268, and he can go up even further. I've turned off his A2 simply because the A1 does more damage. Now I'm prioritizing his and opening with his A3, the block damage, but of course you don't really need to prioritize like I have. The AIs are generally smart enough to do what they need to do. So it's a full auto for all difficulties. Yeah, we'll give it a run and see how it goes. Keen to try out how Ronda goes. So the team in itself, it'll take a little while to get into sync. You can make it get into faster sync if you manual it. And if you want to manual it, all you got to do is make Deacon only use his A3 on the 5th turn. And then it gets into sync 1 turn quicker, which is definitely not worth it. I prefer just to hit auto and watch it go. So Ronda, she should get a few extra little ally attacks as people do their attacks, and that's where her damage should really ramp up. But basically when this team gets in sync, it'll be Doom Priest going first with the cleanse and possibly the increased attack, and then everybody else will go in after. And naturally it'll go Doom Priest into Deacon, and then from Deacon you go usually into Ronda, but because I've got the speeds around, I couldn't quite get her fast enough with the stats. It will go Helicath, and then from Helicath to Ronda, and Ronda to Warcaster. So a pretty standard team, pretty much like any 2-to-1 block damage team. Yeah, the damage, as you can see, is starting to take off really well now that we've started to get into sync. I think turn 5 or 6 is perfect sync. Right now it's, I think 3 or 4 of them are running at 2-to-1 ratio. Helicath is on a toxic set to try and build up some more poisons as he goes. He's also got the Brimstone. Deacon Armstrong and Doom Priest have Phantom Touch, and Warcaster, he does in fact have Cruelty. So see how the team goes. I'll fast forward the little bit once we deal in some more damage, and I'll catch you at the end and I'll show you all of the champions. Cheers. And here we are, coming up to a 1 key very soon. Should hit 1 key by turn 38, I suppose, turn 38, 39, which is really impressive considering this is most definitely the weakest affinity. Like, everybody here is doing their part. Warcaster's doing a little bit of damage, Helicath, and so on and so on. But Ronda is the main DPS champion, and this is the weak affinity for her. So she's getting a lot of weak hits. I'm actually genuinely surprised how many weak hits she's getting. I know she hits the boss a lot, so there's expected to be, but I've seen several times where she was hitting all 4 weak hits, which was just crazy. So yeah, Force Affinity is definitely the weakest affinity, so I was glad I could show off that. The next weakest affinity is actually probably the Void Affinity, because on her A1, instead of getting the 4 hits, she'll be getting 3 hits only. And then of course, Magic Affinity and Spirit Affinity would both be very similar, but Spirit Affinity would just be slightly better because of Helicath and Deacon being able to hit a bit better. If you're wondering about the debuffs from Helicath and Deacon, yes, they might get weak hits against Magic Affinity, but they're hitting the boss that many times. Like, Deacon does his decreased defense for 2 turns every single clan boss turn. So there's a very small chance that decreased defense will fall off. And then as for Helicath, with all of his A1s placing that weaken down, even against a Magic Affinity, that weaken will never fall off. So you have no real affinity problems. This is by far the weakest affinity. Again, the closest next would be Void. Really much higher damage than I was expecting, considering the Ronda build. If you put Ronda in Relentless and even have much lower stats, but have her in Relentless, your damage would be significantly better. And the one beautiful thing is, because it's such a long fight, Relentless always evens out. You might hear a bit about RNG, good RNG, bad RNG with Relentless, but over a long clan boss fight of about 50 turns, it really does even out. So my main team using like an Acrisia, because she's in my best Relentless gear for Hydra. So it's a very similar team to this one. But anyway, so that team there, it only varies by 1 or 2 million, and it does about 125 to 130 million, depending on affinity. As for the same affinity, there's a tiny variation, even less so with Acrisia, who's in the Relentless gear, because it really does even out. So we're getting much higher damage than I thought. I thought we'd get to about 80 million with this team. But yeah, I'm really impressed, really happy with it. So Ronda, as good as she looks, is really smashing out the damage. So she's doing about a 25k hit each time on her A1, about a 40k hit each time on her A2, and then of course on the counter attacks they're a bit weaker, they're about like 17 to 18k per hit, because there is that damage decrease when you do ally and counter attacks. So yeah, there you go, 17. She's in quite a nice amount of Giant Slave procs, and she, yeah, really pulling out the damage, which is quite surprising. I was not expecting this result with her. Now, of course, with a Deacon, you can also run him in a Toxic set if you want, and really just keep that debuff bar full, and then this team would probably hit 100 mil. And the beautiful thing about this team is, because with the support champions, you bring the decreased defense and the weaken. You can bring any DPS champion in the Ronda slot. Now, Ronda's great, as you can see. Granted, the stats are high and hard to reach, but as you can see, notebooks in her, relatively good stats for Ronda, like relatively accessible, and she is smashing. So this team here, really good. Even Warcaster, you take his his cruelty blessing off, and this team will still be a 1 key team, 100%. Unfortunately, I just don't have Warcaster without it, so it is on there. So yeah, really solid. There's not really too much else to say about the team. It's very solid, as you can tell. It just goes through its rotation, just like any other block damage or unkillable team. We're gonna hit 90 mil by turn 50. Hell yeah, that's super cool. 90 million, that's 10 mil more than I thought we were gonna get on the weakest affinity. You go on any other affinity, you'll be almost getting to 100 mil. On a spirit affinity, I think you would. Good other options for Ronda is just any DPS champion, like a Lord Shazar, amazing. But here we go. So Ronda with 24 million, Helicath with 24.5. So he actually pulled in front of her because he was on strong affinity, and he also has the Brimstone. So you put a blessing on her, you can get Brimstone on her as well, and she can do that damage instead. But yeah, really solid damage there. Deacon on 11, that can get a lot higher. Warcaster 13, Priest on 17. So we'll jump into the builds and I'll show you their builds. So we have got, to start off, we have got Helicath. So he's in a toxic set, and of course he's running Brimstone, so we can get the Smite blessing. His masteries are pretty standard, picking up Laura Steel just so I can hit the speed caps. And then going down to, of course, Warmaster. And as for his total stats, we got 51k HP, 3,800 defense, 256 speed, which is crazy to get with the rest of his stats, 103% crit, 161 crit damage. As you can see there, very low crit damage, almost all of his damage coming from his passive, in the sense of just a lot of hits, or a lot of Warmaster procs, a lot of Smite procs, and a lot of Toxic, and then 323 accuracy. So a lot of his damage is not pure damage, which just really shows how that can ramp up on any champion, and really shows how powerful Toxic is on Helicath. Then we come into, who else did we have? So we had Ronda here. So she's on 2 speed and a perception set. Now she didn't need to be in a perception set, she doesn't need any accuracy, but I really just wanted to keep her stats as reasonable as I could. So she's at 4,300 attack, which is pretty high, I think. 252 speed, which is really high. Crit cap and 221 critical damage. The critical damage I kept nice and low. I didn't want to go to around the 250 because not everyone has gear like that. Even people building these really high-end teams still don't necessarily have the gear for that. Now, if she was in Relentless and her attack was dropped to like 3,000, and then her critical damage was at like 190, that she would still do a lot more damage. The Relentless gear is just insane for your damage dealer. So even if you have to run critical rate gloves on a Relentless gear, it is significantly better, and you'll be generally surprised about how much more damage she can do just on Relentless. Now of course you can get counterattack accessories on her, Relentless, and then all of that stacked up with her passive, where she can join an ally attack, and she would just completely decimate with the abs. So the A1 attacks one enemy 3 times, an extra hit if the target has 50% less HP after the 3rd hit, and you can get an extra 20% damage with free books. A2 attacks one enemy 3 times, ignores shield buffs and 30% of the target's defense. That's why that one is able to hit really good. And then she places 2 debuffs that can't be resisted, and thankfully the clan boss can't take those debuffs, so they never waste spots. You can get an extra 20% damage on that as well. And as for A3, I turn that off for the Demon Lord. It attacks all enemies 2 times. Damage increases by 30% if this champion has more than 50% HP. I'm curious to see, it's still a double hitter, so it still could be really good. And of course, because she's using block damage, she always has 4 HP. So that could actually be a very good ability, possibly even still better than the A1. So I did turn it off because I didn't have any books. I didn't want to, if I had books and that was getting another 20% damage, I probably would turn it on. It might be worth a test to run that. Yeah, could be worth a good test to see what she can do there. And then of course a passive, You can't run the attack aura with her because you do need the speed aura from Deacon Armstrong. So who else do we have in that team? We did have Warcaster. He's got a 6-star blessing, which is ridiculous. And of course, so I put Cruelty on him, so that's sweet. And then he's just using his A1 and his A3. Bit of damage from his A1, better damage than his A2. And of course, he doesn't place the block buffs or have the chance of placing it, so no wasted debuffs either. As for his masteries, he's just straight down to Warmaster and keep picking up Laura Steel again so I can get the speeds. His speeds are absolutely insane. 275, 100% crit rate, 255 crit damage. Those blessings really help. 4,100 attack with all of that. It's just insane. But as you can see, you get a lot from the blessings, a little bit from the faction guardians, and a decent chunk from the masteries. So it all sort of balances out. I don't think I showed you the Ronda. Here we go, the Ronda masteries, did we? So she came down to Giant Slayer. Now most people for Clan Boss, they just pick up this because it doesn't really matter. This is a great one for her, but I wanted to go with the Stoke to Fury because I think Ronda could do a lot of work in Hydra, and then you can get a lot of debuffs in Hydra, so I thought this might be pretty decent to just get a little bit more damage. So I did pick up the Methodical because she does use the A1, that damage does help, and then support tree is pretty much useless for her, but I did need Laura Steel just to pick up the speed to get up to that really high speed threshold. So after that we had Doom Priest. Here we go. So Doom Priest has got Phantom Touch on his blessing, the 15% speed in all battles, the cleanse on the A3, and then the increased attack on the A2 for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and then just a hit on A1 with a chance to place increased critical rate. So because of this, you can risk having like that 98% critical rate or whatever on your champions, you know, just missing the crit cap, but it's never anything you want to rely on. Her masteries were straight down to Warmaster, and then I also picked up Deterrence so I can get a few counter attacks. If I couldn't reach the speeds, I would go with Laura Steel, but Doom Priest's speeds were pretty easy. I went with Relentless Gear on her. That's because I use her in Doom Tower, so Relentless really just helps with their cleansing and all of that sort of stuff. Plus really good in Clan Boss because she can cleanse, place increased attack, then get a Relentless proc, and then get an attack in, so that's quite nice. So she comes in at crit cap with 206 critical damage and 3700 attack, which is pretty cool, and 205 speed. Now there is a method with this team to run your DPS champion at this 200 speed, which would be amazing for Ronda because you could really build up her stats even with Relentless Gear running at that slower speed. But then if you do that, that means you need to have a block debuff champion in Ronda's position, and the block debuff champion needs to be on a 3-turn cooldown for 2 turns at least, like a Brogni or a Rio Bone Spear or a Blind Seer. What's those sort of champions? Now if you do that, I think you might need a stun target for when it is magic affinity, so that way they don't stun either Deacon or Helicath. So it does make it a bit more harder to do, but with Doom Priest she fixes it up and sorts it all out. And then lastly we have Deacon Armstrong. So I've got him in a Savage set. I don't really know why. He doesn't do a lot of damage, as you can tell. He'll do a lot more damage in a Toxic set. A Toxic set would be amazing for him. So he's got the accuracy you need by a long shot. You only need about that 240 accuracy to be really safe. His crit cap with 179 crit damage, 233 speed, and 2.6k attack. And that's why his damage was so low. His attack is just way too low. Skills, of course, you get the Leech on the A1, the decreased defense on the A2, and then the turn meter, and the grants an extra turn on the A3. As for his masteries, we picked up Warmaster, of course, and then of course we also picked up Law of Steel to get the speeds, and Sniper and Master Hexer to get the defense, decreased defense extended, and Happy Days. So that's the team. Really happy with their damage. I might just do a quick run in the Nightmare Demon Lord, and I'll just like super fast forward this, and then you can just see the sort of damage you can do there. Again, same affinity, so weak affinity, and considering we're going up against it, I might go into the team with Ronda and I'll turn this here on, but I'll still prioritize that A2 because I think it'll bring out more damage. And then we'll just see what sort of hits she can do before I let you go. So we'll get into the fight. We'll let it all run through a couple rounds. Like I said, this team is all affinity, all difficulties, full auto, nothing to worry about whatsoever. Now you do take a little bit of damage here, so if you have a block debuff champion, you might think, oh, I can't get the heals, so that first little mastery might not be very good, but Deacon also does the leech, so everyone will get to full health even if you have a block debuff champion instead of Doom Priest, because Doom Priest brings the heals. So it's really good combination of if you bring a block debuff champion, so that way your DPS can be a lot slower and you can get a lot more damage, which is really cool. Alright, so we'll wait till maybe turn 6 when everything is all set up and all good, and then we'll have a little look at her damage and see what her damage difference is. So from this looks there, that was her A2 and it was doing about 46k a hit, where in the Ultra Nightmare is doing about 40k per hit. So it's a little bit higher. Over a long fight that'll be a lot higher. Whereas somebody like Helicath, they would do pretty much the exact same damage, because almost all of their damage is from the passives. So let's wait a couple more turns and then we can really compare the damage with her A3 versus the others. I have a sneaky feeling that her AI doesn't use the A3 though, because I haven't seen it go off yet. It's a pretty cool looking ability too. Yeah, I have a feeling that that doesn't happen. So we might have to jump over to manual at one point when it's her turn, and we'll just manually click it and see what sort of damage she does. Here we go. So her A3, which she's got full health, and she'll do 30% more damage. So let's see what happens there. Bang bang, 57k hit when it wasn't a weak hit. Wow, 57. So she would get two 57k hits. So you're looking at 110k from that ability. Her A1 is not doing anywhere near that. It's doing what, 60k, and her A2 is doing about that 80k. So yeah, her A3 in a block damage team, not an unkillable team, is definitely worth it. So I would definitely put her that as a priority 1. That damage was insane, and it's still a double hitter, so the Giant Slayer isn't a weak, it'll just be the same as War Master over the long run. So that's the video. Thanks for staying with me for this long, and if you're going to use Ronda, prioritize that A3. It does a ton of damage. Alright guys, I'll catch you later.